Adam, with the clients that you work with on a day-to-day basis, what are the things in their businesses that they need to be looking at and that you do each year? Just tell me a bit about the life cycle in each one of your clients.
Well, I'm actually happy you use the term life cycle because that's a term that I use a lot too in employment law when describing really the employee's life cycle within the organization, which begins at the time they start with the organization. It actually begins before then, once they, apply for a job and maybe go through the interview process. But for purposes of the life cycle, what I do with business owners is I look at each phase of the life cycle and evaluate, what do the companies have in place? For example, let's say in the pre-employment part of it, what do they do as far as job advertisements? And how do they handle interviews? What happens after the interview? Do they present an offer letter? Do they do a background check? Do they do a drug screen? Do they do another interview after all of that? What happens before someone physically starts working for the company? Because all of those things that I just described, they all could have employment law ramifications to them. So that's one piece of it. The other part of the life cycle is now the employee is actually working for you. What are some things to be thinking about? Well, you have to pay the employee, right? So how is your pay structure set up? Is it in compliance with some of the things that you and I have talked about before, as far as minimum wage, overtime? Do you have timekeeping and record keeping, things like that? As well as what policies are you subjecting this employee to? So something like an employee handbook, which you and I were just talking off the record about, is something that I update every year for my clients, just to make sure that it has the current state of the law in the handbook, but also the current state of the workplace and some of the things that are important to a particular client's workplace. So that's the during employment phase. And we may look at things like how to keep employees around a lot longer, the positive performing ones, of course, and how to get rid of the ones that are not performing well. And that sort of leans into the next part of the life cycle, which is, let's say things are just not working out. How do you properly offboard somebody? How do you properly terminate somebody? And that's something that every one of my clients should call me before they do, because I want to make sure that they do it the right way to avoid being sued. So the offboarding side of it is, something I always tell my clients is, no employee should be surprised by being let go, because you would have done your homework up front as far as preceding that termination with, things like policy explanations if, let's say, the employee is violating a policy, or warnings if, let's say, the performance has not been there, or behavioral discussions if, let's say, the behavior has been a problem. All of those things should be preceding a termination, so that the termination is the organic flow from those things that preceded it. So that's the offboarding side of it. And then there's one final thing. I know we're getting close to 4 minutes here. And that is, after the employee leaves, what should you be thinking about? And that's where you start looking at things like unemployment filings, or potentially a demand letter, or an EEOC charge of discrimination. And what should you be doing when you get one of those? Well, you should certainly let me know if it warrants addressing something and how to address one of those things, because all of those things could potentially escalate even further if not handled properly. So that's just like a small sampling of the life cycle of the employment phase that I work with companies on, and there's really a lot to it. So it's really an enjoyable area of law that I'm happy to be a part of.